America needs reliability, roads to keep supplies moving, energy to power every moment. And we need that reliability now. Hundreds of new infrastructure projects are awaiting government approval. Projects that will supply thousands of jobs and improve American lives. But new red tape from the White House could create years of backlog, or worse, project cancellations. Ohio can't wait any longer to build back better. We need progress now for better roads, more affordable energy, and a reliable supply chain. Help break the gridlock. Call Senator Brown, 202-224-2315. And tell our senator we need him to cut the red tape and get Ohio moving again. 202-224-2315. Paid for by the Coalition for American Jobs.
Dr. Rick here. Another sign you're becoming your parents is getting particular about details that don't matter.
The craziest thing happened when we got tacos the other day. Was it Wednesday or Thursday we got tacos? I know it wasn't Tuesday because that's when I went to my hairdresser. Shoot, what day was it?
See how we all lost interest there?
Progressive can't help you from becoming your parents, but we can help you compare rates on home insurance with Home Quote Explorer. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and third-party insurers. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here to continue with our second episode of affordable UFAs this offseason for the Ravens. And that affordable tag almost has to come with air quotes because the Ravens will make very few moves, we both think, this offseason. Joining me to do this show, again, is Josh Reed. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. I would say I'm looking forward to free agency, but I don't anticipate being very busy as far as writing up any signings like it was last year with the Marcus Williams and everything.
Yeah, so a lot of signings last year, no comp picks this year, which is unfortunate. The Ravens could use some additional selections. Obviously, they may get them by trading back, but this may be a year where they start to pile up some comp picks again. I think they're likely – the guys that are most likely to sign a free agency are the guys who are going to be still around after the draft when they won't count against the comp pick formula. Yeah,
I see. I wouldn't say nothing but second, third, and fourth wave guys, but I think that'll be the talent pool the Ravens will be picking from either post draft or maybe you might see a signing or two of like some familiar guys that we'll get into here shortly that I wouldn't mind them picking back up or but I do anticipate them being more busy post than pre-draft.
Yeah. All right. So we got a lot of players with some warts who the Ravens may have a chance to. Some warts or some age scars on them, both of them. But let's talk about the two pricey guys right away because there are obviously a fair number of guys who the Ravens would like to have, but they're probably just out of their price range. Talk about a few of those guys.
Do you want to start with corners or edge first?
We can start with corners. I got my list of 4 corners they can't possibly afford.
Oh yeah, I mean we could start at the top of the market with some of the guys like who's the Patriots guy? I forget his name off the top of my
Jonathan
head.
Jones.
Jonathan Jones, yeah. And people should be wary about the whole Patriot cornerback paying the Patriots top cornerback has rarely panned out for other teams. I mean, if you look at recent history, J.C. Jackson went to the Chargers, and he was banged up out. But even before then, he was getting burnt like toast. And even Malcolm Butler departed. His best years were in New England out of that system. And the dude, he's just a guy. So, if people would actually pay attention to the trend of New England number 1 corners going out and breaking and making free agency, they'd know that those guys often aren't worth the money that they get paid. Stephon Gilmore being an exception, but he didn't start his career in New England. He was a guy that really actually wanted to pay, but then let go. So as far as Jonathan Jones is a no-go. I think the Jamel Dean is another guy who's supposed to get no way. No way. Supposed to get like $16 million a year. I even saw on Spelltrack that a guy like Eli Apple, the notorious Eli Apple, is supposed to garner an annual average salary of $11.6 million.
I don't see how. I have no idea how. Dude, that's Sports Track or Sports Center. Or who gave you that?
Spelltrack. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Spot Rack. My bad. SpotRack.com. Yeah.
A Spot Rack, not Sport Track. Okay, it's okay. I don't trust that valuation. I don't think Eli Apple comes near that. So we'll see.
I mean, even then, I still wouldn't do it. Another guy who's gotten a lot of hype, but he's clearly over the hill. A guy like Patrick Peterson, for the coming off of his year with the Minnesota Vikings. Even though he had like 5 interceptions, some of those, if you actually watched the game, some of those were kind of just like overthrows, tip balls kind of thing. Like it wasn't even really like a right place at the right time kind of thing. It was more just like, he kind of got lucky in the balls tipped or overthrown there, and he's clearly over the hill. He's nowhere near the same guy he was in Arizona.
Okay, well, I've Peterson is my maybe he falls into the right guy range, and we'll talk about him when we get to that. But let's go through the rest of the corners that they're.
I wouldn't mind him as the QB as a CB2. It's just that he's the kind of guy that would sign like a 1-year deal.
Oh, sure.
And, and the Ravens are if they're going to sign a veteran guy, they'd rather sign him to at least a 2-year deal to kind of massage that cap hit. So while I don't think he'll garner top money, especially not nowhere near double figures as far as like 10+ million. I do think 1 year $6.4 million is what he's projected to get on Spot Rec is still a little too rich for the Ravens' blood.
It'll be an incentive-laden deal wherever he goes. And I honestly think he's at the age, since we're talking about him now, let's talk about him now, where there's going to be very few teams that want to sign him to a 2-year deal. And it's not just the fact that he's 33 right now. And it's not 33 in September or something. He's 33 now. It's the fact that when you get a player that old, particularly a good one, and they might retire after only 1 year, it becomes harder to structure that as a 2-year deal. I remember we had all of those consecutive times that Ed Reed and Mason was the other guy who signed a bunch of 2-year extensions to stay on, and then it ended up being a 1-year deal, and then it's got to be re-extended, kind of thing. Yanda had the same thing at the end of his career. I mean, don't really begrudge those guys, those deals, but on the other hand, I don't want to pay, spread a 2-year amount, which Ravens might have to do anyway. I'd rather just have an incentive-laden deal that pushes some money into next year otherwise, but has no commitment to it.
Yeah, if they could get him like a Justin Houston kind of thing with like I said, incentive-laden deal, and he's kind of like in that ring chasing mode because at this point in his career, I wouldn't say he's a lock to make the Hall of Fame or a first ballot, but he's got a bunch of Pro Bowls, bunch of All Pros, all that kind of stuff. He might just be in that ring chasing mode, and he might not want to go back to Minnesota. He sees that Darius Smith already wants out of Minnesota. He made the wrong bet picking the wrong purple team last offseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Let's talk about some of the other guys. James Bradbury, a guy the Ravens could have had last year, maybe by trade, but it would have been a big commitment to Bradbury last year. The Ravens didn't really want to, commit that kind of capital to him. So I understand that they're not going to get him this year. He just had a great year. Cam Sutton is another guy who's been playing very well for Pittsburgh for years now. A guy who would fit their need a lot because he's got a lot of slot corner play in his career. But honestly, just at the price tag, he's a no for me.
Yeah. He was a like when I saw his number on Spot Rec, they were saying he was projected to give like 7.2 million, and I was like, that's still a lot. I mean, yeah, he really fit and allowed Marlon to do his Marlon thing on the outside, but at that number, I just don't know. A guy will, I guess I'll wait till we get into the guys who like another guys we like at that position. But as far as other guys, there's a group of second round corners from 2019 that are hitting their open market, and Sean Murphy Bunting, Rocky Asin, and Byron Murphy, who, while they're not household names because they're young at a premium position, those guys are already projected to garner at minimum like $10 million on average.
All three
salary.
Of those guys, because I mean Murphy Bunting, he's on my list. He's a young guy, so that could certainly drive up his price, but he's definitely on might be about right list, and I'd be excited to get him, but then
I'd be excited too. The dude has great ball skills. I loved him at Minnesota, where he or Central. Was it Minnesota, Central Michigan? He came out of. Can't remember exactly, but he's just like I said. He was like when I was compiling my list from my article. I was just like, oh man, Sean Murphy Bunting. He's not a household name, but then you look at the age and the position. Man, that might drive his price because corners. I mean, just look what happened with Shaquille Griffin a couple years ago. The guy goes out. He was the average corner in Seattle and gets a 3-year, $45 million deal from the Jaguars. And it's always going to be a team with teams with money to burn and need at premium positions. They're going to overpay for young talent like that. So I don't know. I like Murphy Bunting. He's like one of my favorite under the radar guys, but I think he might be a little too pricey when it's all said and done.
Well, that could be, honestly, but I think he's probably on the Ravens list somewhere because he's got that ideal outside corner size. The Ravens, honestly, their need right now is at outside corner. They'll be able to find a slot corner somehow, even if it's sticking with Kyle Hamilton, which I think would be a perfectly reasonable option at this point. Then they might have to get a safety, by the way. But Bunting is also a potential one-year prove-it guy. He might be a guy that nobody's really willing to make a big commitment to because I don't think he's played all that many snaps in his career. And it could be a guy that I may be wrong about that. I may be confusing him with somebody else. But if he does sign a one-year prove-it deal, the Ravens could be a team, and he's a perfect guy in terms of if he has a big year with the Ravens, he could go sign elsewhere and generate a comp pick even. So
yeah, I definitely think he's worthy of it. It's just like I know he's shown he has ball that ball production skills and that kind of stuff usually gets you paid, even if it is on a more expensive flyer than the Ravens can afford.
Okay. All right. Well, could be. You mentioned Rock Ya-Sin. He's definitely on my list of might be about right guys. I think he's more likely to get paid than Murphy Bunting is to me. I think that he's just has a little more of a resume at this point. I think you tell me in terms of what you think about it. There's a bunch of other broken guys at corner if we're just going to do it this way right now. But I got one other guy I like that I don't know if you have said yet.
I do like Rock Ya-Sin. I liked him. I liked him coming out of there was a Temple back in 2019. But he's a guy that has shown enough to where I think he's going to get paid pretty decently. And just like I said, the Ravens are still currently over the cap right now, so I don't know how they fit a guy like that unless you have a super low cap number in year one. But that stuff usually balloons faster than teams would like it to in years 2 and 3 if you sign him to a 3-year deal.
Right. I would agree. I think he's going to get a multi-year deal. He hasn't been an every down player yet, meaning he's missed time in each of these seasons or not been the guy each one of these seasons, whether it's been last year at Las Vegas or the previous 3 at Indianapolis. Always been a pretty good player, never a great player in terms of his coverage skills. But last year was his best year, and passer rating against was 82.5 for the year. That's good. Certainly, prototype kind of size for the position at 6'0", 190. I'm not sure all the pieces are there, but somebody probably will value him more than the Ravens. If he somehow becomes a non-valued commodity, though, I'd love for the Ravens to take a flyer on him because he does, I think, address their needs pretty directly. They don't need to have the number one corner, obviously, on their team. That role is taken. They would love to have a younger guy at the position right now, though, and I think it is the position the Ravens are most likely to address in the draft.
Yeah. I mean, like we talked about on previous pods. I definitely think either they're going corner or receiver in the first round this year. Whichever position they don't take in the first, they're taking in the third. Mm-hmm. If they don't accumulate more picks by trading back or maybe possibly even trading up.
So, where are you on looking at all these external options? And I've got one more guy for the slot I really like, but looking at all the external options on the outside, where are you on re-signing Marcus Peters? Because he looks pretty attractive compared to a lot of these other choices.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the Ravens' best option. I feel like Marcus wants to stay in Baltimore too. From everything that we've heard from inside and outside of the building, he really wants to stay in Baltimore. And I feel like if they could possibly even get him on a more team-friendly deal. I wouldn't be surprised if he took a cheaper deal to stay in Baltimore. Like if it was I'm not talking about like a $5 million difference on average annual salary, but if it was like $1 or $2 million less, I feel like he would sacrifice that to stay with the Ravens.
Is he ready for a Jimmy Smith type of rotational deal where he re-signs a number of years for $3.5 million, maybe with some incentives laid on there for playing time as well? Or is this too early for him? Because I think he's 29 right now, or has he already turned 30? He's right in that range right now. I think he'll be 30 for the next season. So the question is he a guy? Yeah, last year was his age 29 season.
Yeah, he's 30 years.
He's 30 right now in January. So yeah, it's an interesting question because it probably a player the Ravens send to the market and say, hey, look, determine your price, but we're crazy about you. We really like you. we'd love to have you back as a number 2 cornerback. You'd play every play for us, but we'd like to have you back under any circumstances. But if you can come back on the Jimmy Smith deal, that'd be fantastic. I just don't think he's quite at that point yet. I think he's going to want to get paid one more time, maybe on a 2-year deal.
Yeah, and Spot Rock has him at average annual salary of $9.8 million, which I think is still a little too rich for Ravens blood right now. But like I said, if he's willing to take a team friendly deal, I just feel like there are teams out there who feel like there are Marcus Peters away from being a title contender. I could definitely see him going to another place and being their cornerback 2, or even the quarterback 1 if they have a good secondary around him.
Okay, well, that's what they got to be. I mean, the team's got to be a one player away from winning the Super Bowl to make Marcus Peters really attractive. And obviously, there's probably 18 teams that think they're in the position, and 4 of them probably actually are where they might actually benefit from having Marcus Peters. And the Ravens might be in that group, might be the group of 4. But the Ravens certainly would consider themselves in the group of 18, and so would a lot of other teams that won't likely make the playoffs, this next year. So I'm interested to see what happens with Marcus in any case. He's been a great Raven for when he's been here. Obviously in 19 and 20, he played very well, and really a shame that he lost the season after that.
Yeah. I think even the fact that he, had a bit of a down year coming off of this thing is just from what I've been hearing and reading that, there's still a lot of people out in the league who are still high on Marcus Peters, what he brings from a veteran leadership standpoint, from a competitive standpoint, he's still the, ball hawk, even though he didn't rack up a bunch of interceptions last year. He still has that turnover ability and that nose for the ball.
I'm going to give you my dark horse guy at corner. And maybe you got one too, but the guy I like for the slot for the Ravens is Danny Johnson coming over from the Commanders. So he'll only be 28 in November, and he really hasn't played that much. His total career snaps played is only 769 according to PFF, but he has played so well when called upon at the end of last year that I think he's a very natural fit. He would address the Ravens' slot needs very directly. Obviously, a lot of that depends on what they decide they're doing with Kyle Hamilton. But passer rating against him this last year, only 66.2, and he played a career high second highest, 292 snaps. So played quite well. So he's a guy that I think would be an ideal kind of guy for the Ravens to pick up in the slot. I think he'd come very cheap. And I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's 2 years, $5 million, 2 years, $4 million. But I don't think it'd be expensive. He's undersized, which is going to be the big knock against him. But that's the general build of a slot corner, and the Ravens have put themselves in kind of a good position of not needing an aircraft carrier. Well, they need an aircraft carrier, but they also need a slot corner. So they need both. So that'd be the positive there.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed a trend because a few years ago, slot corners were starting to get paid. You had guys like Tavon Young and Justin Coleman and Troy Hill, who I think is affordable now, but wasn't a few years ago. And he's a guy like Troy Hill, who I have written down here in my notes, is a guy I really like. As far as like a slot guy, I got to keep Marlon on the outside. He had a decent season last year. His first year back with the Rams after a 1-year stint with the Browns. And it's funny. I think when he got traded to the Browns and then traded back to the Rams. And like guys like that, it's just like the slot corner market. It started to go up. And now I feel like it's starting to kind of come back down to where teams aren't putting as high of a value on slot corner as they were 2-3 years ago. And you're starting to see outside guys get prioritized more, even though guys with inside outside versatility are so valuable, but they're also hard to find.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. And I think one of the things the Ravens found this last year was that you don't have to have prototype slot characteristics to develop a valuable player in the slot. And they had Hamilton there, who is a big, slow guy, frankly, in the slot. He's made to play safety where his instincts, he can put them in play on where the quarterback's going. And that 4.7 speed doesn't hurt you too much. Plays a lot faster than the speed, obviously, but you can't play a lot faster than your speed when you're playing in the slot. You pretty much play at your speed, and it's still very difficult to cover the guys who have that incredible quick twitch and the ability to run that whip route. But what they got out of Hamilton was extraordinary in terms of a good tackler, a guy who played great downhill, got to the ball carrier quickly when the ball was in his area at all. I mean, just a whole bunch of really positive things, and good size to threaten the quarterback throwing over him, which is nice. Great ball skills too when the ball's tipped up in the air. So you get a lot out of having Kyle Hamilton in a short area zone. I think you could get more on the back end, but I think the Ravens are in a position kind of like they were with Humphrey for about 3 years in there, where the Ravens may need Hamilton more in the slot than they need him on the back end.
Yeah, I was still a little mad that he got his lone interception of the season got negated by penalty. I forgot who the penalty was on, but I know it was against the Saints, and he's the guy that I love the role going with Clark, getting traded. I don't want him to fully transition into a strong safety only kind of guy, just because I feel it kind of limits his role. And then the whole appeal of Kyle Hamilton, coming out, it was he can do so many different things. So if you kind of put him in a box, not literally down in the box, that he does excel playing down in the box, but if you put him in the box as far as the confining and defining what he does and the impact he can have, I think it kind of takes a step back, or doesn't you maximize him to his full potential. I don't like him lining up against squirrely slot guys. I know against the Steelers, Nick was like with that Sims receiver got him a couple times for big games down the seam. So you never want him on those squirrely Julian Edelman types. But if it's like a power slot kind of receiver, a big body receiver, oh yeah, I believe that Kyle Hamilton could lock him up real good.
Yeah, 12 personnel, another ideal spot for Hamilton to be in there, guarding the tight end, obviously. And that's everybody makes it sound like all they can do is guard a tight end. That's so far from the truth. Hamilton does so much for you when he's on the field in terms of just being a short zone player. I mean, he's a great if he played the Anthony Levine dime role, he'd be great at that just because he has great instincts. He reads the quarterback very well. Good size, always a problem there for quarterbacks. Just there's so much to like about what he does. I don't want to pigeonhole him either, but on the other hand, the Ravens' strength is that they've got 3 guys who can play free safety, and Hamilton is the one I'm actually the least sure about being able to play good free safety in the NFL. I'm absolutely sure, obviously, about Marcus Williams, and I'm pretty damn sure about Geno Stone at this point. In terms of
after watching what Geno did last year in place of Marcus Williams, I mean, like, so he didn't have the big, huge splash plays, but if the fact that you're not calling his name regularly in a bad way is a great thing. I mean, like, so he didn't have those splash interceptions. I mean, shit, the rate that Marcus Williams was picking off passes to start the year,
nobody
I thought he was going to.
Yeah.
I know he was. I know he wasn't going to keep up with it, but I thought he was going to give. What's Stephon Diggs' brother, Trayvon Diggs? I thought he was going to give him a run for his money there for a little bit, as far as most receptions and all that. But I really like what Geno showed. Just covering space, taking away throws in the back end, and just like showing that. I mean, man, I'm glad that the Ravens, they still have to tender him. I wouldn't be surprised if they put a fairly high round tender on him just to ensure that another team that enticed to try to sign him to an offer sheet.
I mean, the ideal situation right now, and in terms of how I would think about it, is just go ahead and sign him long term right now. Stone would be a guy that I would offer a 3-year deal to. I don't think it has to be out of this world, because I don't think he's got a ton of suitors. I think he fits the Ravens well. But if they figured out, a way to pay him 3 years, $8 million, minimize the cap hit for 23 kind of thing, that'd be great. They might not get him that quite that cheap, but
yeah, hopefully. Sign me up for that. And sometimes with guys, like a guy that I guess we're going to get into here shortly, the Ravens will have guys that are really good and as spot starters and as quality depth pieces that eventually want to branch out and go elsewhere because they feel like they can start in this league. But if you can find a guy that like a Levine who appreciates and values being in that niche role, then that'd be perfect. I mean, and I think Geno prides himself on special teams too. So I know I even saw something written. I've even wrote about myself about him, like really kind of like want to take over the mantle of the whole co-cap thing and be that special teams ace that Anthony Levine was. So if they could get him on a like Anthony Levine like contract, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, well, that would be super cheap, and it would be great. I think he's going to command more than that right now. I think. just because there's enough
Yeah,
teams
I meant like lengthwise, not the compensation wise. I think he's going to get paid more than Anthony Levine, but
yeah,
as far as like keeping him around on these 2-3 year deals, I'd love that.
yeah, no, me too. Okay, so are we done with corners? Do you have anybody else you want to mention here before we move on to the edge guys?
One guy I wouldn't mind the Ravens bringing back, and I feel like would be very inexpensive and kind of I wouldn't say a match made in heaven, but makes pretty much sense for where he's at in his career and their need. A guy like Anthony Averett, bringing Double A back. I wouldn't mind that at all. A lot of people, ourselves included, thought he was going to garner a lot more than he did in free agency last year. He ended up only signing a 1 year deal, kind of 1 year proof deal with the Las Vegas Raiders for 1 year, $4 million, and ended up only playing 7 games and got placed on IR twice. So he's a guy coming off a down year, coming off an injury plagued year. And could be looking to reboost his build up his stock again. And unlike in 2020, coming into 2021, when he was slated to be the third corner behind Marcus and Marlon before Marcus went down, he got his first extended opportunity. He'll come in, barring an addition in the draft that beats him out, because Ravens aren't in the business of just giving jobs away, But he'd come in as the favorite to be cornerback 2 opposite of Marlon Humphrey. So he's a guy that I feel like will be very inexpensive. He probably could be signed. Honestly, Ken, after the year that he had, I would say even when he was on the field, he wasn't all that great, but he only played 7 games. They might be able to get him cheaper than the 1 year, $4 million that he signed last year. But they might be able to get him for like a 1 year, 2.2.
Lace some incentives, vet-min plus incentives, possibly.
Exactly. That's the kind of ballpark.
Coming off a 7-game season, it's really easy to put in NLTBE money, not likely to be earned money, because you have to relate it to last year's accomplishments, and that wouldn't be too hard in his case. Additional snaps, additional games, whatever it might be. But that I think he'd be a reasonable one to go out and get. Let's move over, I guess, to the edge guys, if you're good now. And you talk about whoever you want in terms of additional linebackers. Let's just do that at the end, positions other than edge. But I've got a set of 2 pricey guys at edge, but let's hear yours first, and I'll chime in with any additional I think is just out of the Ravens price range.
I don't think they're going after a guy like a Bud Dupree or some of these other high priced guys. Off top, I don't think they're going to go after the Jadeveon Clowney. I don't think he's on their radar, even though he shouldn't. I mean, he's a great edge setter, but and even then, he wasn't even a great edge setter in Cleveland too much. Like he had built up a reputation of being a great edge setter in Houston and even a little bit in Seattle. But like with the Browns, I mean, they've had one of the worst run defenses in NFL history the past few seasons, and he's been a regular starter for them. So he's another guy that I don't think they'd be after. Let me pull up my list here. And some guys that who are rotational guys are expected to not necessarily break the bank, but earn hefty salaries this offseason, more than the Ravens can afford. Guys like Arden Key and Samson Ebukam are guys who are going to garner anywhere between $7.7 million per spot rack. They're supposed to. Ebukam is projected to get $7.7 million annually, and Key's like about 11.3, which are price tags the Ravens can't afford.
Yeah, Key's certainly going to get that. He's a good 2-way defender. I think he'll get really paid this offseason. So I think he's out of the Ravens group. Actually, Ebukam is one of the guys that if they were looking at a 2-year deal, I'm not so sure the Ravens would be completely out of that. He's been very consistent, 4.5 to 5 sacks every year the last 4. He plays a lot of snaps, so his pressure rate is not really as good as his sack total would tell you. He did drop to cover a lot in his early years. So when I look at that, I say, well, maybe this is a guy the Ravens would turn back into some Sam responsibilities because of what he's done in the past. He hasn't recently, by the way. He hasn't done too much coverage, but you never know. And maybe they could find a 2-year deal to minimize cost in 23, and he'd be the guy. But he'd be on the outside of the affordability range, no doubt about it. And he's definitely a tough one, kind of like Patrick Peterson, in terms of getting a guy who I think, honestly, at 28 with what he's done, people do think we know who Samson Ebukam is. And with all these consecutive 4.5 to 5 sack years, now 4 in a row, is anybody going to be really that excited about him? And I think if you're going to, you can go out and get one of these ancient edge setters. We're going to talk about them, who probably have more potential on the upside than Ebikam does. Ebikam, what he mainly does for you is eat snaps. So if you have a lot of your snaps accounted for, the Ravens have a fair number accounted for, but they do need one more player. He's probably a little bit less valuable in that situation.
Yeah, so he's a guy that I've had my eye on for a while and had to spend this time last year. I definitely think he'd be a guy. He'd be an ideal candidate for the Ravens to target, just because they like those rotational guys and having a nice stable of rushers. I mean, look what they had with them midway through the season this last year. They had too many edge rushers they didn't know what to do with. But he's a guy that I just think he's like right on the fringe, on the outside of what the Ravens are able to afford and willing to spend. But some other rotational guys that I do like, that I feel like the Ravens could afford. A guy like Charles Omenihu from the 49ers. He's a pass rusher that had 4.5 career high 4.5 sacks last year. But like I said, he doesn't play. He's not an every down defender. I don't think he started like more than like 5 or 6 games for the Niners last year. I think I got it written down on my notes.
Yeah, I have notes on Omenihu too, because obviously he played in Houston for 2.5 seasons before he went to the 49ers. He did play in all the games. His snap total for the season in terms of defense was 54%, which ain't bad. Okay. He's actually played pretty well last year as a pass rusher. That is most of what he does. He's a situational pass rusher, not really a run defense guy. The problem I have with it is that he's just really coming into his own as a player. And I think you'd be buying high on what he did at age 26. Was he this last year? No, I'm sorry. He's still only 25 right now. So think about, when teams look at free agency, one of the big things they look at is, if I sign this guy to a multi-year deal, to a 3 or 4 year deal, is he going to produce throughout the entire contract? And I think with Omenihu, the answer could be yes for the entire period. So I don't think the Ravens will get him. I actually think he's probably out of the Ravens price range of the edges that are available.
Yeah, I was say he was like a fringe guy for me. I just think he'd be closer to the range than a guy like Ebikam or Key would be. Like the sex, I don't know who's paying buku bucks for 4.5 sacks, but given his age and the premium position that he plays, his price could definitely get driven up. Yeah, but another young dude that I do like, and who's kind of, I wouldn't say bounced around a bit. He's been on he's just coming off his third different team. A guy like DeMarcus Walker from the Titans. He quietly had 7.5 sacks for the Titans last year. His third team in the past 3 years. He started his career with the Broncos, then played with the Texans, and last year with the Titans. And he's a guy that kind of in that same vein of rotational pass rusher that I think they'd be worth the flyer. Yeah,
the reason I really like Walker is that he's a two-way player. He's a guy. I think he weighs about 280, and he's tall. He's definitely a guy who can help you as both take run snaps and pass snaps. So that'd be interesting. He'd probably bump inside to play. The one thing, there's no real record in his career of dropping a cover, and you wouldn't figure at his size that he'd be able to do it very often. But he's played for 2 different 4-3 teams in Denver and Tennessee that wouldn't have any need for that. So he wouldn't really have had an opportunity to do very much, and he hasn't. But he doesn't he doesn't meet a Sam need for the Ravens. So if he's just on the rush side, then he's got a lot of competition with the Ravens.
When it's time for an adventure on the open highway, one quick call to American Family Insurance gets you headed in the right direction. Our travel peace of mind package is there if you encounter a bump in the road. From roadside assistance to rental car coverage, we have you covered. Find a local agent or get a quote at amfam.com.
American Family Insurance.
American Family Mutual Insurance Company, SI, and its operating companies, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin.
For snaps, because this is going to be the year for Oweh to take off with Chuck Smith in the house. I mean, that is Chuck Smith. His entire future as a coach will be determined by what happens with Odafe Oweh.
Man, can we just take a second to just kind of like, I know everybody's kind of geeking over the coaching staff that the Panthers put together, but the Ravens have like quietly and like under, like, I know Lamar has dominated the headlines, but the coaching staff that they put together, an investment that they're making in the development of their players this offseason is amazing. I mean,
great.
it's like for the third year in a row, you're getting the non-traditional you got coach. You get started with Keith Williams, where he was the wide receiver guru. We're talking about a guy who's helped develop the likes of Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, and then you go out and get a guy who's worked with Hall of Fame players and Von Miller and Aaron Donald, who has 2 decades of pass rush consultation with various different teams, including the Jets and the Bengals. And it's like, man, I just feel like he's. Oh man, I'm so excited for the potential of Elway. I think Peter King was 1 year too early on the Odafe Elway Defensive Player of the Year hype because 2 years.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was his second year. This one,
1 year too early. Because man, once Chuck gets his hands on Elway, I feel like sky's the limit, man. If anybody can refine him, it's Dr. Rush.
Yes, I agree, and I'm very excited about what they've done coaching wise as well. I mean, honestly. The Williams signing did not do a whole lot for the Ravens wide receivers, but you could point to Devin Duvernay and say he took a step forward. It's hard for me to really say that the Ravens passing game with the combination of Martin and Williams, which was supposed to, really bring a lot to the game, really took the Ravens to a different level in terms of their passing game. You can point to injuries, you put to non-investment, the position, you can point to Greg Roman, you can point to a lot of things, but James Prochet fell flat on his face, literally on the field a number of times this year, but he didn't have he didn't have a good year. And the Ravens passing game was not what it could have been. And those guys I think they're kind of getting a pass on this. Keith Williams, is he back actually?
Well, so yeah, he's still on the staff. It's just I don't think they've changed his role. I know he was up for the wide receivers coach job. He was one of the guys who was in the running, but we ended up going to Greg Lewis, who was an outside candidate. But as for what I've heard and what I've been keeping track of, he's still on the staff. Same with James Urban. He's still on the staff too. They're just going to be shifting into different assistant roles now that Well, I don't know. Maybe because Williams is still listed as the pass game specialist or pass game coordinator for the offense. So I'm not sure what they look like under Todd Monken, if he'd want to have somebody else take over that role or just have Williams as just like the different, like, well, I wouldn't say quality control coach, but like the next step up from that.
Okay, so T Martin changed roles and he's the quarterback's coach now, or is he something else?
No, he's the quarterback's coach now. So Martin is taking over James Urban's role.
And so it sounds like Keith Williams is moving into the pass game coordinator role that T Martin had last year. So Williams was the pass game coordinator, and William and Martin was just the wide receivers coach. Okay, I'll take your word for it. That's not my recollection of it. I thought that Williams had the more specific top of the route role, and that T Martin was more about the connection between the quarterback and the wide receiver. And when you 2 years ago when I was at camp and I watched him at practice, T Martin watched the release off the line of scrimmage, and Keith Williams was always watching the break coming out of the top of the route, which I really think of as being wide receiver coaching. Of course, at the line of scrimmage is important too. Don't get me wrong. The release is critical, but that wiggle at the top of the route and breaking into whatever route you're doing is what Keith Williams really seemed to be specializing in. So you're probably right, because you definitely, and I don't normally get too caught up in titles. I just thought this was kind of like both of them were moving up one this coming year, with T Martin moving to quarterback's coach if Keith is moving pass game coordinator. But anyway, I'll take your word for it. We'll leave it at that. I want to talk about some of the pass rush guys. Mm-hmm. One guy that I think is out of the Ravens price range, but really had a bad year this last year is Marcus Davenport. And his year last year, we had half a sack the whole season. Kind of reminds me of that year that Zadarius Smith turned in, or you can look at Odafe Oweh's senior year at Penn State, or not senior year, it's junior year at Penn State, I guess it was, where he still had a pretty good year. It still, generated a fair amount of pressure, but he just couldn't finish.
Yeah, I feel like even though he had a low sack total, the fact that this guy's a former first round pick and he's had success in the past, I feel like somebody's gonna overpay the hell out of him, and he's gonna be one of those first wave guys that's gonna get I wouldn't say a record setting contract, but he's gonna get mid tier to possibly even top of the market, depending on who how desperate a team is and willing to bet on his potential.
Right. All right, got another guy that I think could be interesting, and he's been reasonably durable. He's injured for a few games in 2020, but Rasheem Green, coming out of Seattle and then Houston last year, maybe a 1-year prove it guy, and could be a Chuck Green protege. But the guy is huge, and he's a good kick inside guy for the pass rush. You can use him outside. Not really your prototypical 3-4 outside linebacker, but probably can play in that role, and definitely a kick inside guy on third down if you want him there.
Yeah. 3.5 sacks isn't bad. And I know on Pro Football Reference they have him listed as a defensive tackle, but he's definitely one of those inside outside guys. At 6'4", 279, you could definitely put him out there on the edge. And he can set an edge as well as rush the passer. So he's a guy that could be very, very, very much affordable. A couple of guys. You want to talk about Justin Houston as far as because
go ahead.
I was going to say, Houston, given the resurgent season that he had, you'd think that he priced himself out of Baltimore's price range. But given that, these past 2 years, he's waited until damn near training camp or the start of training camp, to I wouldn't say commit to, but to come back to playing and to resume his stuff again. Unless the team blows him out of the water, like a prime contender, outside of the Ravens, blows him out of the water with an offer, I feel like he might go that route again. And what allows the Ravens to do is potentially clear up more cap space, hopefully with long-term deal with Lamar, or maybe possibly do even some other restructures, address the position in the draft, and then, like I said, didn't see where your cap space is come late June or late July, early August.
In terms of the draft, let me start there because there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. I think if the Ravens go edge in the draft, it's probably likely they will do it, but they'd be looking at a developmental player where they're not expecting to get a lot necessarily in 2023. So, obviously players can develop much quicker than you can expect, or they can be slower. But with pass rushers, it tends to be slower more often than it's quicker, particularly once you get outside about the first round. And sometimes, look at the Ravens' second round guys, Kamalak Correa and Bronson Kafusi and Upshaw and guys like that. They haven't typically worked out quickly. Paul Kruger, who did work out, took time to work out. So I think that if they're going to go with a later round pick, and I think they're already some pretty good bet on the exacta for their first and third round pick is going to be cornerback and wide receiver in some combination, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we're talking about no higher than a fourth round pick, then, maybe they get lucky and they get a Zadarius Smith, and Zadarius Smith didn't produce right away either for the Ravens. So he could, but you could end up with a good long-term player. Maybe they get lucky and they get a Matthew Judon, but again, a guy who doesn't necessarily produce right away in his rookie season. I just think they're going to have to be realistic about what they get in a later round. And I'd still like them to go for more of a pure pass rusher because I think that's the harder thing to find. Just looking through some of the guys they can afford in this free agency group, there's a lot of pretty decent two-way defenders like Walker, who really fits into that category, and the other guy we just talked about, Rasheem Green. Yeah.
Another guy like and he's probably definitely on the radar given he's a cap casualty. It's a guy like Marcus Golden. I could see him possibly being the next Justin Houston, but guy who's Ravens a down year is not gonna not gonna because Justin Houston signed after the. He's not going to count against the comp pick formula because Justin Houston was a post June signing, but Marcus Golden is a salary cap casualty, so he can sign at any time, and they could have him. He's coming off a 2-sack season, but the year prior to that he had 11 sacks. So it's kind of like one of those buy low, potentially cash out high kind of situations. And he's actually not that old. He's been
32 this year.
2015, but yeah, exactly 32 this year. Not exactly quite over the hill. Still a very productive player. Could still be a mentor to some of the younger rushers. Still set the edge, decently. But what he brings as a potential pass rusher, for the low price that he's probably going to go for, I think is well worth an investment if they're up for that, or if they don't want to wait around for Houston.
He'd be in a large group of players that is a vet-min guy to me. If Marcus Golden wanted to come to Baltimore and finish his career here with 2 consecutive vet-min years, great. If he wants more than that, I'm out. I'm not even sure I could try, but I'm not even sure I could structure a good incentive-laden deal. Hey, you could always work out something where he earns about $3.5 million on the top end, kind of thing, if he reaches a certain sack total, but combination of factors with Golden, I think is more of a down arrow than it is for Houston, who's older, and I still feel like has more left in the tank probably than Marcus Golden. I have a bunch. Yeah, go ahead.
Houston's definitely my favorite as far as of the two. But I think that at where his stage in his career, Golden is, and given his age, and like I said, coming off that down year, I feel like he could probably be one of the most affordable guys. Like, I agree with you as far as being a vet min or barely above that kind of dude.
I've got 7 guys that I think are bargain bin edges, and I didn't have Marcus Golden in the list. So I'll tell you my 7, and you can chip away at these if you want. Carlos Dunlap, 34, still reasonably well-balanced run and pass defender. If he came here, he'd be taking the JPP role. I don't think there's a big demand for his services, but we'll see. Incredibly, he has 100 sacks now in his career. 100 exactly, one ahead of Calais Campbell. The Ravens love the bigger players like this. Does not exactly fit the 3-4 outside linebacker role, but he also is a guy you can kick inside on pass plays. Obviously be playing the rush end, and a guy who certifiably can control a tackle in terms of holding down the run game.
Yeah, he's a dude that gave the Ravens headaches for years playing with the Bengals, and like I said, his length and the way he uses is still very impressive. Still coming off a decent year last year with 4 sacks for the Chiefs. And he's a guy definitely like that. I have my list of potential, like I said, bargain bin dudes who wouldn't command top dollar, but could provide some really, I won't say really high upside, but pretty solid upside.
He's also a guy who the Chiefs might want back, and he might really want to finish his career in Kansas City because, hey, he's already got that deal in a way. If he's talking about maximizing his ring chance with, what he's got. I do kind of feel like he's a player, if he's playing on the Ravens, that he would probably get some more interesting opportunities to rush the passer with scheme than he has in his years at Cincinnati, for example, where he was a lot of a plain vanilla 4-man rush and still quite effective. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't get as many opportunities with his length to do some stunting and do some things that would really be effective there. So he's a guy I probably like a little bit more. I'll give you another name is Shaq Lawson, 29, solid 2-edge defender, kicks inside on passing downs. Another guy who fits that mold coming out of a 4-3. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I've been a fan of Shaq Lawson since he was at Clemson. He's never quite lived up to the hype he had coming into the league. But I just feel like he was always going to be a solid dude. Never going to be that elite at top tier edge rusher. But he was going to be a guy that'll get you a handful of sacks every year, set the hell out of a run, a guy you can kick inside and run stunts and games with.
All right, another 5 I've got still. Melvin Ingram is still around, and he seems like he's on the list every year. So he's, again, bargain basement guy. 2 guys the Ravens had last year, of course, Jason Pierre-Paul. The Ravens used him so effectively as an edge defender on running downs. So long as he's willing to do that and still get some pass rush downs, but a lot of those are going to come from the inside, I think he could be quite valuable to the Ravens. Several batted balls this last year. I thought had a pretty good year. I know PFF didn't grade him well. He kept showing up in my notes as making good plays. So I probably like him a lot more than PFF does.
No, I love JPP too, man. And I think because he didn't have a gaudy year as far as like stack totals, whenever an edge rusher, especially a veteran guy, is kind of over the hill, doesn't have a big to moderate, sack season, they're always going to be a bargain bin guy where they could be had for right around the vet min, if barely above that. So he's a guy that the Ravens probably he's a guy that's probably going to still be around in spring and early summertime. So I don't think there's a rush on signing JPP. Nor I think he's in a rush to sign with anybody. He's kind of like in that stage of his career, like, hey, you need an edge setter? Like, I feel pressure a little bit.
Yeah. He could finish his career with the Ravens on 2 more vet min deals. It wouldn't shock me if that's the way it worked out for him. And if he is on the team, he'd be a high favorite to get cut. He's one of these guys who brings you flexibility on the roster and building that. You've got Brent Urban already on the team, who I think that will happen to again. But it always helps to have your team with 2 or 3 or 4 of those veteran guys that make complete sense to cut and return. And he certainly would fall into that category.
Yeah, I don't even think at this point in his career he'd be one of those bottom of the ticker guys where Ravens cut Jason Pierre-Paul. It would just be in that list of cuts.
You're a general cut list guy now. That's good. The Justin Houston, of course, he could command a few dollars. You mentioned earlier you think he might not be worth very much. Obviously, sand's running low in the hourglass for him, but he had a great year last year. A lot of it was as a complimentary pass rusher, which is a good thing that the Ravens were able to make use of that, but not necessarily something that people are going to look at and say, wow, he's just beating his opposing man every single time. He did a very good job of getting some high motor finish him sacks after somebody else started the pressure.
Yeah. I mean, he's there were times where he beat guys, clean off the edge, slower tackles out of their stands. But like I said, a lot of it was high motor and like late in the play kind of sacks. And he's one of those guys that he's at the stage of his career where, or less is more. So you get the fewer snaps he plays, the more effective he can be. And we saw that when like during that stretch was like from he had like two or more sacks in like 3 straight games, broke Terrell Suggs record. And so like that's the kind of guy that I'd love to have back as a rotational pass rusher. And let guys like like Owe and Ojabo, let those guys eat consistently. But when you come in on those NASCAR packages or just to get the spell a guy like Owe, who probably gonna be playing a lot on early downs, given that as good as his play as a run defender. I'd love to see Justin Houston come in on as a third down specialist.
Yeah. Having one of the things we haven't really talked about yet, Owe spent some time as a Sam linebacker last year. I don't see that happening again. I think this year in particular, third year, really got to turn this into a value proposition. The Owe pick, whether or not you keep him around, you got to know what you have so that you make that 5th-year option. I think he's probably going to get it at this point, but it's expensive at edge, so you got to be careful about it. And then whether or not you want to make this guy a foundation player, there's still a pretty good chance. Screwing around with his position is the easiest way to not know what you have at the end of 3 years. So I don't see, even though he's got the best athletic profile to go back to Sam linebacker and do some of what Tyus Bowser does, I don't think they'll do it. I think he's going to be a pure rush edge this year. And it doesn't mean he won't drop the coverage a few times because the Ravens will run exotic packages and he'll drop anyway. But I don't think they're going to ask him to be regularly responsible for the tight end as the Sam often is.
No, which I think is great. I mean, like having a healthy Tyus Bowser cannot be any more understated in this for this defense as far as what it allows Mike McDonald to do is from a designing and place calling standpoint, and also what it allows his other outside linebackers to do as far as like letting those guys go eat. Having Odafe in that exclusively, I won't say exclusively, but predominantly rushing role as the rush linebacker. I can't wait to see what he does. I mean, in this almost rush exclusively role with Dr. Rush, coaching him up. I mean, I really feel like this guy's in store for the season that many projected he'd have his in his second season. Yeah.
They no one. I guess people like Peter King probably were not factoring in the fact that he was going to be forced into a position change by being the only guy who really matched the athletic profile. And even the Ravens, they had Vince Beagle around. It looked like he might take some of that role and make it a little easier. But I'm with you in terms of Odafe will still play a lot. I think, I'd like to hold his snaps down to 65% because I think he'd be more effective that way. But he could play 60, 65% either way. The Ravens play a lot of rotation, so they're used to it. And if you do that, then you really need another guy who's going to play on the rush side and play relatively few snaps. And I think JPP is that guy. I think he makes a lot of sense to be that guy. And on the other side, probably rushing off the you have Ojabo who you have to figure out how to get in there. And I don't think we know how much Ojabo is going to play yet. By the way, I don't think he's going to be in every down player. I think he'll be a pass rush specialist somewhere. Okay. So some of it will come inside. Some of it will come on one edge. Some of it will come allowing Tyus Bowser to drop off the line of scrimmage, or maybe even line up inside, which he may then drop off the line of scrimmage from. But Ajabo will have a variety of pass rush roles, I believe, for this Ravens team.
Yeah, and they were even lining up always inside some late in the season when he started becoming more effective. So I feel like having multiple guys that can do that and take advantage of those mismatches with guards and sometimes even centers if they're lined up, as that rover over the center. I'd love to see that.
Let me keep going on because I've got a couple more guys that I think would make sense. Carl Nassib is a guy who's been around the league for a long time, been in the news for other reasons. The one I want to talk about is the financial advice he was giving in the Browns locker room, which was some of the funniest crap that has ever been.
Was that the Browns or the Bucks? Was that the Browns or Bucks? He was doing. I think he was with the. I think it was the Browns. It was during Card Knocks when he was doing the evaluations and all that. That was
all you have to do is get 10% every year, and you'll double your money every 7 years. How much money did you get on your signing bonus? And he was talking to Jadeveon Clowney, I believe. Myles Garrett. Miles Garrett. And guys, I got 30 million or something, and well, look, in 28 years, you could have 16 times that much. And then some offensive lineman came in the room and asked him, "Well, where can I get that 10% return?" One of the all-time great questions, and Nassib's response was something like, "Well, you just have to invest it." It's funny stuff is all I can say. Anyway, Kyle Van Noy, another player. And if you want to address Sam linebacker.
Sam all day.
Yeah. He would make a lot of sense and reasonably priced, fits the role, 32 years old, wasn't terrible for the Chargers last year. You're basically buying on a fit guy. And if there'll be a lot of people who'd see the move and say, what do we need this guy for? He's not a sack guy really anymore. And the reason is because he can play Sam. And that's what the Ravens really need.
Yeah, the Chargers kind of forced to play him more than they wanted to last year because the Joey Bosa went down. So I feel like given his he was never a huge sack guy, but I feel like I've always admired Kyle Van Noy's game. And just like the multitude of ways that he was deployed in New England, and then in Detroit, and then last year with the Chargers, I feel like they didn't really use him like in that same role. But he'd be a great Sam guy. He was one of my Sam guys last year as far as a potential fit with the Ravens with Tyus Bowser recovering from a torn Achilles.
Probably be cheaper this year, so
much cheaper.
Yeah, good chance the Ravens will take at least a look at him. And I think that's everybody on my bargain bin list. So it's a fairly extensive list of edges who could give the Ravens a little something in some way. If they need snaps eaten, they're those guys. If you need situational pass rushers, there's those guys. And if you need a snap eater on early downs, you got at least one or two of those guys. Dunlap and Lawson really both fit that bill. And if you want a Sam, you got Van Noy. So
Baskin Robbins over here, 31 really flavors of pass rushers.
Really is. You got a lot of choices at edge. So there are a couple guys I want the Ravens to stay away from that I think are big problems. You want to talk about some guys in that category
for edge?
Yeah, well, for anything really. I've got okay. I'll go through a few of my guys, and then you can just react to them as you go. Yannick Ngakoue is a guy, although could be a fine pass rusher, just his history with the Ravens makes him a no for me.
Yeah, no, same here. No, thanks.
Deshaun Elliott is a guy that I actually would be excited about getting back, but the only way I want him back is if they can't extend Stone. I want them to expand Stone's role. He's just too good to be having the limited role that he has right now. So I think you got to at least get him on the field on dime snaps. Got to at least get him on the field on third down. Whatever you do, he's got to be playing. If not, Deshaun Elliott coming back and being the Ravens' dime might be pretty damn good.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that at all. He's still a guy that's kind of struggled with injury start his career, but still a fan favorite. And I never thought he was the free safety type that they tried to get him to play. a few times with the Ravens. He's always kind of been the strong only kind of guy for me. It's because of the down nature and aggressive nature that he plays with, and he's never really been a ball hawk. Another guy who I feel like would be a ideal fit in that dime role, Tony Jefferson. He's a guy that even talked publicly about making that transition to a dime linebacker role full time, and he's a guy that shined with. I mean, really, he was doing really good with the Ravens last preseason?
Yep.
And he was. I feel like if the Ravens could have kept all their safeties, they would have. It was just it was a fact of a roster crunch, and he figured he'd get more playing time with the Giants, or a likelihood of getting elevated. He's still on the Giants on the practice squad, but he ended up getting elevated and eventually playing a lot more with them than he would have with the Ravens. Given they had with Hamilton and Clark and Williams and Stone last year.
Yeah, he really gave the Ravens an unbelievable special teams presence when they had that special teams unit in the preseason had Stone running the group. It should have been the indicator to me that it wasn't going to be Jefferson. Yeah. Jefferson and Kyle Hamilton. And that is an unbelievable amount of talent to put in your special teams unit in the preseason. Just really looked great. But I'd love to have him back. I think the ideal situation for that would be if Queen were traded. Then I think you're looking to figure out your platoon at weak side linebacker, and maybe you figure it out such that it includes some sort of 2-down thumper and Jefferson as your dime back. On an all season basis, and then you could still fit 4 safeties in that if you've got Hamilton playing slot corner and you've got Stone and Williams on the back end. I think that is a very potent potential 3rd down pass defense.
I love that very much. I said that I just feel like like as much as I do love Patrick Queen, I just don't see how you can fit him and Roquan and some of those other guys under the cap 2-3 years from now. So if they could get a guy like Tony Jefferson, depending on how long he wants to play, is like one of those recurring vet men guys, problem solved.
Yeah, no, I'd be very excited about that. A couple guys I want to stay away from are injury guys. Dwayne Smoot is coming back from an Achilles injury. Mm-hmm. Do not see him being ready, but he's good enough that it might be exciting if they did the same thing that they did with Juwan James to bring him back. Yeah, because he could a 2-year deal, kind of minimum money. If they could figure out a way to pay him effectively nothing this year and then $3 million in 2024, I'd be kind of excited about that sort of a deal because he's good. He's good, but I don't know if that's in the cards really for the Ravens to try that again. The other guy's Chris Wormley, coming off that knee surgery. I guess he suffered that against the Ravens, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
So December surgery. I was looking out online. I couldn't find a diagnosis in there, and apparently they have been keeping it secret. So I'm not sure what the plan is with him, but I think he's going to have trouble really getting paid. Coming off that, obviously, so we'll see where that ends up. He probably is keeping it hidden himself, although eventually he's going to work out for teams if he wants to get a 2023 contract. So he probably just doesn't want to color it in advance of when he's ready to work out.
And also, he wasn't very complimentary of the Ravens. After he left, I think like there was a whole article that Mike Tomlin said, a team tells you what they think about you if they trade you in within the division. And then when they played the Ravens a few times, he said some unflattering things about the Ravens. But some other guys that I'd also stay away from that I also think the Ravens can't afford, guys like Leonard Floyd, Frank Clark,
yes,
and Robert Quinn, who's clearly over
all three of those absolutely on the list for dump those guys. Frank Clark, one of the really bad moves that Kansas City made during an era where they didn't make a whole lot of bad moves in the front office. They didn't make a whole lot of pay a lot of really overpriced guys. They generally were pretty frugal in a lot of ways, similar to the Ravens. But Frank Clark was the one guy they massively overpaid during his time at Kansas City.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. The guy was money in the postseason, but like weeks 1 through 17, either he wasn't on the field or he wasn't this. He was kind of a shell of himself. And I guess it's kind of cool that not cool, but like it's nice to have a guy that can turn it on in the postseason. But dude, like we're in the toughest conference in the league, and if we're gonna continually get that, because getting the first seed for a team like the Chiefs is very paramount, and having a overpaying a pass rusher is a guy who only shows up really in January and February if you make it to February. Only one team does now, so he was just the guy that was kind of overrated. Like, he had that 10-sack season with the Seahawks, and then people kind of just like took that, and I don't know, it just kind of blew out of proportion for me.
All right. Well, great stuff. Anybody else we didn't talk about that you want to mention now? Because I think we're in alignment on a lot of these. Although there's a few players that's interesting that I think might be affordable and you think probably are not, like Murphy Bunting, say.
I'd love Murphy Bunting. I just like even though he was kind of in the doghouse at times, his last 2 years in Tampa, it was just like what he showed during his extensive playing time. And I feel like some team might be enticed enough to, I wouldn't say pony up, but pay more than what the Ravens are willing to pay.
Fair enough. Well, fair enough. Josh, always a pleasure to talk football with you of any sort. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more this offseason because you're one of our regulars, obviously. And tell folks where they can find your work online.
Yeah, you can find all my Ravens stuff at Heavy on Ravens with Heavy Sports. That's where all my Ravens content is. Don't expect a whole lot of free agency buzz coming out these next few days. I'll have my realistic free agent articles coming out tomorrow. But outside of that, man, I expect to not be very busy. I'll be digging a lot more into draft stuff than doing free agency stuff these next couple of weeks, just because I don't think the Ravens are going to be too busy.
All right. Well, sounds good, Josh. And we'll look forward to talking to you about the draft, about some position, which we haven't determined yet, but looking forward to that. Other folks out there, if you'd like to do a that one play, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open, and we still got a lot of plays from Ravens history that haven't been done, even though we've done almost 50 shows now. So please hit me up, and I'll get back to you right away. I'm at Filmstudy Ravens, just in case you don't know, and love to hear from you. Josh, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.
Get ready, because Scott's is taking over daylight saving time. It's such a big event that we're calling it day-long saving time. And now it's got real savings. In fact, it's the biggest deals of the year. Audacious? Absolutely. So don't wait. Stock up early and you'll be able to save up to $20 on Scott's Triple Action and Easy Seed products today at the Home Depot and Lowe's. Offers available March 9th through 22nd at select U.S. stores while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See store for exact offers.